How does it sound as a means of financing Kiev's needs for the next 2 years? And can you just put this loan into context?
I think we have to start by the largest helping Ukraine come through IMF, International Monetary Fund, and most of the world's countries are members in IMF.
I'm Mahika Ravishankar, Deputy Editor at Trade Finance Global.
I'm, as you say, Mikael Björknet. I'm coming from Sweden.
Welcome to Trade Finance Talks, your go-to trade, treasury and payments podcast. Brought to you by Trade Finance Global.
Hello and welcome to Trade Finance Talks. I'm joined today by Mikael Björknet, CEO of Privatbank, the largest bank in Ukraine. We were first introduced at the EBRD annual meeting in May, where I spoke to him about the bank's efforts on the front lines. Unfortunately, 7 months on, little has improved for the Ukrainian people. If anything, shelling has increased in severity and frequency. But one thing which stood out was the constant resilience and optimism with which Mikael spoke then, something which has shone through just as we've chatted today ahead of recording. Mikael, welcome back to Trade Finance Talks. I'm delighted to see you again in London.
Thank you very much.
So to start with, just please introduce yourself, tell me about your role within Privatbank for those who haven't tuned into our video interview from May.
No, but I'm, as you say, Mikael Björknet. I'm coming from Sweden. I'm a seasoned banker in 2 large financial institutions in the Nordic area. And a year ago, they recruited me to being CEO, or as they call chairman of the management board in Privatbank. Privatbank is by far the largest bank in Ukraine. It has more or less half of the population as customers, and many of, I would say most, vast majority of the small businesses. And therefore, it's an important bank to really keep up the society, not only in normal times, but now when it's extra hard during war times as well.
I want to talk exactly about that first. I think from the UK and from most of the world, the conflict in Ukraine and the Russian invasion can seem like a very far away thing. All we hear is headlines of high-level peace negotiations, but I want to drill down into everyday life in Ukraine. Tell me a bit about your day-to-day.
My day-to-day, or everyone who's living in Ukraine, the nights are very often full of shelling, meaning that we have drones coming in or we have missiles coming in. They try to hit military targets or electricity or gas, meaning damaging, but a lot of civil people became hurt as well in these shellings. So nights, you quite often spend time in shelters. Daytime, you try to be as normal as possible, meaning that everyone goes to work, even if it has been a tough night. From time to time during daytime, we have air alarms that we, depending on a little bit how severe they are, go to shelter, but it's a little bit less intensive during daytime. The other thing is that the Russian Federation has hit a lot of, I would say, the electricity and the power sources of Ukraine. So right now, in most cities in Ukraine, in Kyiv and, I would say, towards the front line, we don't have electricity enough. So we have different times during the day or night when we can have electricity, and the rest is black. We are also a little bit afraid about the winter. And now it's not so cold yet, but when the winter came, it became cold. Probably the heating will not be sufficient, so it maybe will be a little bit colder than usually. So it's a quite tough winter ahead of us in Ukraine. But I must still say that I'm amazed about, I would say, the drive of the Ukrainian people. How they just, feel that this is something we just have to live with and continue to make the ordinary, life as ordinary as possible.
That's something which really stood out when I last spoke to you. And I just want to dig into that a little bit more. What has stayed the same in these completely unprecedented situations?
We can wake up the morning by it has been, shelling in a city in Ukraine. And then we have a couple of calls out to our customers, and they say that, sorry, our warehouse or our, factory, whatever, has been hit. And they ask, how shall we do now? How can we, restart again? Because everyone would like to restart. No one would like to give up. That's one thing I see is very much impressive. But otherwise, you see people sitting in the cafes. They are out walking on Sundays and Saturdays with the children. School is working, of course, adapted. So if you go to eastern Ukraine, there most schools are underground because they don't want to, let the kids go up and down to the shelter. So instead, they build the schools and the kindergartens underground to be protected all the time. But still, it's a normal life. But then the normal lives stop at 12 o'clock in the evening because then we have a curfew. So it's not nightlife, London style, until to the morning. So it's calmer in that way.
Yeah, no, but it's really remarkable the way that country and the economy has completely adapted to this situation and really taken everything in its stride. It stands out to me as something truly remarkable. When you talk about companies continuing to operate, how have the requirements of organizations like Privatbank changed? You mentioned that winter's approaching, which will lead to much higher demand for fuel and energy. Where does Privatbank sit within these changing needs?
Each sector in economy has different rules to try to follow. Banking is very, I would say, regulated as in every other places. We have, together with the central bank, actually created a program called Power Banking, where we ensure that 50% of the banks, regardless of what, needs to be open. So there we have generators, we have power banks, we have satellites, connections, whatever happens, these should be able to be open. Then, of course, we close them during those minutes or hours when we have shelling because we can't protect from that. But as soon as that is over, it should be working. And this goes out in society because this goes for all the ATMs, regardless where they are standing. It goes for all the post terminals for, acquiring. So we, for instance, have post terminals in some supermarket. Then we need to ensure that the supermarket ensure that they have electricity. And last meeting I had with the central bank now, they said that we need to prepare for 10 hours blackout. Everything needs to work even if we have 10 hours without electricity. So it's quite tough conditions, but that, on the other hand, makes it working.
On the point of ATMs and continuing economic activity as though there was nothing going on, as though it was daily life as much as physically possible, I want to talk about currency during a time of war. Is there risk of a currency disappearing if all of these extra efforts like power banking aren't taken? What would be the consequences if a currency was to disappear entirely?
We don't really say that the currency will disappear because as long as Ukraine is a country, there will be a currency. It can be strong, it can be weak, but IMF and the rest of the, I would say, the international society ensure that we keep the finances in good order. So all the data from our customers, all the, accounts, the funds, everything is in cloud services, meaning that even if the Russian Federation move a little bit into Ukraine or eventually, move all the way, our clients' fund is safe because they can never reach those. That's the way we work in securing the country and our customers and our corporates' funds.
To move on, I've always been curious about this, and since you're here, I'm just going to pick your brains. How exactly does a bank finance the rebuilding of a country after a conflict? For instance, I saw that Privatbank provided 2.5 million hryvnias to rebuild the Kiev Institute of Cardiology after a Russian drone strike on the hospital. How is this money used? Where does it come from? How much visibility do you have on it end to end?
No, you mentioned charity, which is important, but just a small part of the rebuilding and the reconstruction, of course, of Ukraine. But if we start with charity, people would like to give. What we do as a bank, we, of course, have funds set off for charity in different shapes and forms. When we give something, we, of course, need to understand that it's within our principles, it is within, our rules, and we have also a process for follow-up that is used well. The interesting thing is that we usually use these funds together with our customers. So the customers try to give it to the specific purpose, and that you can do through our app. And then we add a sum about that. So it becomes both our customers and ours contribution charity to something for mostly hospitals, but also schools or shelters or education tools. That is something we do quite much. But once again, this is the small numbers. The large numbers is coming that actually both direct investment from foreign countries or companies, but also that I would say the international financial institutions like EBRD or IFC or EIB, they are actually helping the banks with risk-sharing facilities. Regardless if they are for loans or for trade finance, they actually give the banks the opportunity to reduce the risk so the banks can continue to lend out to the corporates, so the corporates continue to invest into society. And that's really, really important. And they are very, I would say, eager to support, and that is needed a lot going forward. So I will say it's very much, of course, it's a couple of grants in this, but mostly are lending financed. And I think it's you who have make some type of calculation that it's needed $500 billion for the reconstruction and rebuilding of Ukraine. So of course, what Privatbank can do is rather to, of course, lend out on our balance sheet, but we are not, even far to contribute much with that. But we can be in, I would say, a partner who knows our customers, who can actually distribute, help, and also ensure international donors or risk-sharing facilities that they invest in the right thing.
Hey, enjoying the episode? Tap follow for more. Done? Let's get back to it.
On a different sort of financing, one that's less out of people's charitable motivations, which is, again, really encouraging to hear. I saw that the EU is planning to raise a reparations loan by frozen Russian assets. Can you explain this a little bit? How does it sound as a means of financing Kiev's needs for the next 2 years? And can you just put this loan into context?
I think we have to start by the largest helping Ukraine come through IMF, International Monetary Fund, and most of the world's countries are members in IMF. And IMF has some program. One program is running out right now, and therefore we have negotiated, or the state has negotiated a new one. And that actually has reached now an agreement on staff level, as it's called, which means the government in Ukraine, as well as the emission people from IMF. So they have agreed upon that next 2 years, IMF will contribute with this if the following condition is approved or fulfilled. One condition is from Ukrainians. They need to approve the budget. It's a stability within the country. And the second one is that they found funding for this program. And that is the member state who usually then contribute with different type of grants into IMF, and IMF then lend out according to the program. Now Europe feels that why don't we utilize those money that is stacked from Russian assets in Euroclear, use them not for taking them and give it to Ukraine, but actually using this as a collateral for a loan that they give to Ukraine instead of giving direct grants from each country. This is what the debate is all about. This is the first time anyone is doing like this, and there is of course risks in to it that you go into the financial institutions and utilize those funds. On the other hand, there is a debate among us that Russian Federation need anyway after the war to pay some, reconstruction contribution to Ukraine, and this is maybe the way to do it. Anyway, regardless if you use that money, that collateral for giving a loan, or if the member states themselves give it, there will be a loan to Ukraine through IMF one way or another. It can maybe take a little bit longer time.
What do you think the European Central Bank refusing to act as lender of last resort on this reparations loan proposal is indicative of?
No, I think it's the first time effect. No one has done it. They need to go through legislation. They need to go through create a new practice. There are always people who would like to do it and not to do it, and that creates a lot of debate. So I don't think there's the will. When living in Ukraine, you feel that Europe has an extremely large will to help. We don't, from a Ukrainian perspective, feel abandoned, not at all, even if this takes a little bit time.
It's amazing to me how you're always so pragmatic and emotional at the same time. I just really admire it. To move on from lines of financing now and reverting back to what we were talking about at the start with lived experiences in Ukraine, I want to talk about inclusion for veterans in the workplace, potentially through the lens of Privatbank, which I assume is the one you know best. How do you support your employees who have left to serve in the conflict for now? And what measures do you have in place for when they return?
This is an extremely important topic. We are around 17,000 employees. We have 1,000 of those in military service, and we have already get back to 150 from military service, and those we're calling veterans then. there's a lot of people already. So we need to do this in a very, very good way. First of all, respect is, I would say, of utmost importance. And first of all, 9 o'clock for 1 minute every morning, the work stop. We have a minute of silence because out of those who have been in military services, we already have, I would say, 28 dead. So we have colleagues that actually has disappeared. And also that needs to be respected. So we start the day by having this minute of silence. But then we work, I would say, heavily because it's equally important, I would say, that when someone came drafted into and get conscription into the military, that's quite dramatic. So we need to ensure them that this is way of life, but we will help you. What we are doing is that we actually pay out salary to our employees, even when they are in military services, above what they get from the state. We try to keep contact with them, and their families. Not everyone wants, but we at least reach out. And then when they're coming back, they should know that they still have their job. Eventually, someone else is on that position because we never know when they're coming back. But we ensure that they still are employees of Privatbank, and we try to find a good way. What's interesting here is two things. One is that they are, better educated when they're coming back, because they had whatever education before they went in, but they get an additional education meanwhile they are in the military. So that's something that we try to utilize. But the second is also that some of them, due to, I would say, the trauma, also need some time, because it's not so easy to come back from military one day and then suddenly you do a normal banking job the second day. So we try to let everyone get the time they needed. We get them both physical but also psychological support. And we also try to create a community, because it's easier if veterans help people coming back from the military services actually adopt, because they know what they're talking about. Meanwhile, you and I don't know what they're talking about, So we try to be as professional as possible in this area.
It just amazes me, the efforts that you and the team are doing. It's amazing. To end, I want to draw this all together. In the next few decades, when this conflict ends, how do you see the role of financial institutions in Ukraine evolving? And I want to talk beyond just lines of credit or financing, but as pillars in the community.
Since I'm a European and coming from a country like Sweden, I know the responsibility of a bank, and that is a financial institution, an institution in society that is stable. That is really, really important, that in Ukraine we create stable institutions that actually also get the respect, because then you have to treat people with respect and then you get respect. I don't think it really is like that yet, because it's still a country who is quite immature, that is creating its future here and now. But if we move 20 years ahead of time, I hope that we will be a society who is much, much more stable, and that institutions are actually following all the rules and create that society where people know what is the rules, how should they, engage into society. So I just hope that we are moving in Ukraine a little bit away from the post-Soviet system where you don't have trust of institutions, into a more the European one where you have trust for institutions. I think that would probably be the best way forward for Ukraine. And hopefully, halfway down here, maybe 5-10 years, Ukraine will be member in European Union.
Yes.
And then, of course, all rules that are applicable here will also, or in Europe, will be applicable in Ukraine. From that perspective, I think we have a lot to watch, we have a lot to learn, but I also think that Europe has quite a lot to learn from Ukraine.
I personally, and I'm sure this is a feeling that a lot of our listeners can resonate with, feel quite helpless seeing this conflict so far away and so many lives ruined, so much destruction that's gone on. I really wholeheartedly appreciate you coming and telling me all of this, because from my perspective, the best thing we can do to help the effort is just to stay informed. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me today, Mikhail. And my take home from this conversation is going to be that charitable drive that people would like to give. I really appreciate you sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.